sort of based on intuition. Okay, how intuitive a 17-year-old person can be, center. Is the rubber floor okay or not? No, the rubber floor is not okay for a data center because if it burns, then the smoke, the fumes destroy the tracks on the PCBs of the servers, that IT systems are more deterministic than people, and working with people who work with IT systems is more exciting because you never know what that with a little bit of increased cost, you will get probably a contract which will say that somebody, given there is a fault on your data center, somebody will fly in the next 24 hours and make a replacement of that hardware and just fly out without even you noticing that. That's a good deal. I mean,
Hi everyone, yet again another interview, and today we have incredible special guest joining us, Simonas Kareiva. Simonas is a seasoned technology leader with over 20 years of experience specializing in software engineering, platform development, and cloud technologies, with a PhD in computer-aided nanochemistry and with the PhD in computer-aided nanochemistry and leadership roles in prominent companies such as Danske Bank, Simonas has significant contribution to the tech landscape in both on-premises and the cloud environments. He is also Red Hat certified engineer and instructor, sharing his vast knowledge to empower future system engineers. Today we will explore his journey, discuss current trends in cloud on-premises infrastructure, and get to know man behind the technology. Simonas, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Arturas. And I'm pretty sure nanochemistry is a difficult thing to pronounce. So yeah, that's nanochemistry, and it gets worse with pronunciation.
I hear you. Also, like early morning for me doesn't help, but we'll survive that. Look, I'm amateur here, so it's nothing more. Like the bloopers and bad stuff is expected, so it's fine. Okay, so
let's do some bloopers.
Yeah, so as always, I'm starting with the icebreaker question, so I did prepare one for you as well. So from what I understood, from our exchange on LinkedIn, you have been traveling across Europe or maybe the world. So which airport has the best business lounge, and which airport would you least mind getting stuck during the winter storm?
Oh, right. So first of all, I've been traveling as a Red Hat instructor. I totally love to do on-prem classes and trainings on Linux, OpenShift, Kubernetes, and so on and so forth. The technology stack that is there at Red Hat to be trained, and that technology stack is best when delivered face to face. I totally love traveling, and I think that not to overemphasize traveling, airports. Some people just they romanticize the airports, and in 6 months of traveling, they sort of, oh, I hate airports. So you have to strike a balance and find yourself a comfortable way to actually travel and get along. And airports can be stressful. So I think that one of the best business lounges that I've been visiting, and when you visit a business lounge, so you visit a business lounge when you have a lot of time in the airport, and I think that SES has really a nice lounge in Copenhagen. I've been there so many times. I've been collecting SAS points, and it was just, oh, I have enough points to have a free entrance there. And it was really a comfortable zone to actually chill out on a Friday afternoon when you're trying to reach home. But yeah, you might think, okay, Zurich, for example, Zurich is a not so big airport, and it has a bunch of business lounges, and they're really cheap compared to the you get a burger outside the lounge, it's 40 francs. You get full entrance for 50 francs, and you can just stay in the lounge for as long as you want. But the problem is that you always end up being in a rush hour. So Friday 4 o'clock is a rush hour, and you just don't find a place. Those lounges are pretty much stuffed with people, and so I think that I would prefer not to maybe be stuck in an airport like the one that are the hub airport, say Frankfurt or Zurich or Copenhagen, except when you find yourself a sweet spot in the lounge. But yeah, the airports are such a place where people can say, "Oh, I love traveling," and others say, "I hate traveling," and you find so many mixed opinions. I don't think I would be mind getting stuck because if you're getting stuck, you're getting out of the airport anyway. So if you're in a winter storm and the plane's not coming, you're out of the airport. You get a voucher, you get a zip bag with your oversized T-shirt, and you get of course you get a toothbrush, and you get some sort of like hygiene accessories, but you'll probably get a 4 hour, 5 hour sleep at a very luxury hotel in the vicinity, unless it's Austria, so the hotels are 50 kilometers away. So it depends. So as long as I have uh, my family's approval to not to find a midnight or 1 p.m. 1 a.m. Flight, I don't mind just getting a hotel voucher and just leave the airport with this tiny zip bag with a toothbrush. I actually started to collect them. I think
Oh,
I have 3 or 4 over the last year. It just happens. I mean, it's just like, oh yeah, well, the plane is in Serbia. It's not flying here, so there is no plan B. So traveling is you have to somehow make terms with traveling, and if you're going to be stressed with small details such as like, oh, I'm stuck, then traveling is probably not for you. But yeah, you have to sort of get acquainted and just play along with the rules, and you know the rules. And if your flight says it's canceled, it's not necessarily canceled. You might just get a rebooking in 20 minutes. So
wow.
being stressful about traveling is probably there are plenty of other things to be stressed about when you're uh, traveling to deliver a class to people that have high expectations on you.
Got it. So, how many like days or trips per year, like in your new role, do you usually get? Just for like, I'm just curious now when you
Uh, yeah, it's from roughly one. It can be 1 week per month. It can be 3 weeks per month. So it depends. Depends on the season.
got it.
If it's January, I'm probably chilling doing remote classes. If it's mid-May, maybe more stressed. September, October, November,
Got it.
people spending corporate money on trainings,
Got
and
it. So,
you're packing yourself.
uh, when I was just starting my career, I was hoping to get the job where I could constantly travel across the Europe and basically, like be, like one day there, another day there. I don't know, like I don't think like I traveled a little bit over, like over the years, and I decided like, yeah, it's fun, but it's also like not for me. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, sorry, it's about you, not about me. Let's get back to like my question. So, um, how did you end up in the computer science? Like, tell me a little bit more about your journey to getting, like to the computer science. Like, we both are similar age. I know before me myself, like selecting the studies of computer science, I was getting into, like back in the day, the MIRC channels and just asking people like, hey, like this software engineering, can you actually live from it? And someone was like, you stupid, of course you can. And it's like, okay, I guess I should try that. So what was your story?
Well, we could actually have a chat over IRC right now. I'm logged on to Lithuanian IRC network since I've been. It's almost 30 years. I'm still there, just because of the people. And my journey started not with the IRC but ICQ. I think it was ICQ, but it was just just trying to figure out the internet, what is there. But back in the time, I think that one of the things that actually moved me to computer science and IT, information technology, was I was editing a school newspaper on a Windows 3.11 PC, IBM PC, back in 1996, somewhere in a school. And actually, last week was the International Teachers' Day, and I visited that tiny room where that PC was located 30 years ago, and the exclusive access to that tiny Windows 3.11 PC was, I don't know, 386 or 486, whatever. Actually pushed me a little bit towards figuring out what is in the box, how the technologies are built. And that was my first glimpse. Okay, I should probably do computer science. I was a chemist, so my father was a chemist. I was copycatting a little bit of his stuff, just writing formulas on the pieces of paper. And I was quite successful in chemistry. But I think that over the my last years in school, given that I had access to computing power, I was experimenting with Pascal programming language, a little bit with C, just barely scratching the surface. But at that time, you mentioned the dot-com bubble. So this dot-com, this internet, sounded to me like, oh, I should piggyback on this. I think that the technology is on the hype. Why not piggyback? So I decided to choose computer science to study computer science, and I got admitted, thanks to chemistry, by the way. I got admitted to the Vilnius University, and that's the sort of the thing that put me on the tracks. And when you're studying computer science, when you're in university, then it just naturally goes. You could just learn C, you just learn JavaScript, then you learn assembly, then at some point you might learn some bit of Python, then you learn SQL, DB2 databases, and then slowly you go to MATLAB and some other modeling. So my master's degree was on the computer-based modeling, and this hype, this post.com fall of the industry, and then it kind of rose again. And I think that the choice that was made that time was a not a conscious choice, sort of based on intuition. Okay, how intuitive a 17-year-old person can be, in my family, nobody did IT, technology, or whatever. So my father was a back in the day, he was a chemistry professor, so he could influence just a little bit of me, because if you study chemistry, it's going to be in my department. If you're going to study computer science, it's going to be one block away. So yeah, whatever, your choice. Make yourself comfortable. So and I made the choice, and I think I was a little bit lucky as well to be in this industry. And to this point, I put informalog in Lithuanian. What the heck is that? I almost became a librarian, because that's what it actually is. Because I was not able to properly distinguish between informatica and informology, which are two distinct subjects in university. That was super fun, because it was almost like an accident. I probably could have made it to this librarian thing in the faculty of communications, but yeah, I ended up in Vilnius University mathematics, faculty of mathematics and informatics.
Got it. So you kind of touched a little bit on this one, but I just want to kind of ask this once more time. So did you actually believed that this is the next major the major industry revolution, the computer science and things like that, internet and things around there? You said as a 70-year-old, 18-year-old, how could you actually know if you're a bunch of experience? But have you ever anticipated that would be the thing which drives your your life, gives you living and things like that?
I knew Moore's law by that time, so I knew it on paper. So I knew that the computational power will double every few years or so. But I think that what drove me, that was also something that played a significant part in my decision, was that I think I felt constrained in a way. The technology is sort of helping and making the life more exciting, but not fully. The computers were slow. The mobile phones were crappy. The web, the online, the mobile browsing was crappy. The games were slow on the computers. You had to buy the 3DFX accelerators and stuff. So you had to optimize for a lot. And I thought to myself, well, if we're going to optimize, everybody he just hates slow computers, and everybody just hates slow internet. ADSL a synchronous DSL, it's going to improve at some point. So and I sort of made this bet that I'm going to just piggyback on this, just put myself in a good position to get acquainted with the technology, just understand what Linux is, what open source is, how to make a binary from a source, and how the whole thing functions. And I thought, yeah, that's going to be useful because this is going to grow. You just can't live with crappy phones, for another 5 or 10 years. And yeah, we got iPhone popping in a few years from that in 2008. So yeah, and that was my sort of personal bet. So I was not an entrepreneur at that time. I was just saying, okay, I'm just going to learn the technology as much as I can. And basically, the sort of constraints everywhere uh, imply to me that it's going to be less constrained in the future.
I mean, it sounds to me like you actually did like a proper, like a evaluation of the, of the education and the industry. I remember one of my course mates, like back in the university, I was like, the person was doing very poorly in any IT disciplines, in any computer science disciplines. Like, why did you choose that? And the person like, well, I liked, like browsing internet, and I thought that's what all the computer is all about. And yeah, the person didn't stick for a very long time, but it's still, yeah. Anyway, so about your education and the final question which I have. So I somehow spelled the nanochemistry. So what it's all about, of your like PhD thesis, and like, is it still anyhow connected to your work or, to career, or is it just like the thing which you did and forgot?
Well, actually, I've been doing some lecturing career in Vilnius University, which I'm capitalizing and doing my Red Hat instructor career on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I'm really proud of, being a lecturer in Vilnius University for 7 or 8 years. I just can't remember exactly how many, but I think when you're in a PhD level, it's not that you're not probably following fully your heart, and you're not fully just inventing the topic as you wish. Uh, when you're a PhD in computer-aided things like nanochemistry, crystal surface, or material surface, there are some narrow niches that you need to pick to actually make a breakthrough somewhere in that niche. So, like for example, my master degree studies was lidar, radar, and radiometry data. That's more of like data science and modeling. Okay, how do we merge those two together? And it was sort of like a very narrow military government grade thing, which you couldn't even Google anything about it. You just had to build an experiment with it yourself. So you have to pick a narrow niche if you want to make a breakthrough. So that does not necessarily relate with your hobbies or your free time. Or I saw people that, oh, I'm just studying computer games because I love playing computer games, but he couldn't get past bachelor, just a master degree. You can't write a master paper on computer games easily because everybody plays computer games. A lot of science, a lot of a lot of companies actually are doing a lot of R&D in this area. So you have to find a niche. So I think I found a niche together with two faculties, so faculty of chemistry and also the faculty of computer science. And that was sort of like, okay, I had a bunch of colleagues from nanochemistry to say, okay, this is a surface, this is a microscope picture. And I was working mostly about digital picture processing, which was also related to a little bit with GPU. So I got to know GPUs. I sort of understood and scratched the surface. Okay, how the GPUs work in terms of how good are they at actually reconstructing a 3D image from a 2D microscope images, and the microscope costs like 2 million euros, or like $2 million. But you just do the reconstruction with free tools, and that saves you another 7 millions because the 3D microscope costs 10 millions. So you have to figure out, okay, I have 2D pictures and I have to do a structure for motion. So you have to rotate the thing in the microscope in a certain way to actually get the VSFM pictures and then blend them together, reconstruct the surface, determine surface properties, and you have to compensate for that, for those 7 millions that you save, and you buy a simple microscope instead of a 3D scanning or transmission electron microscope, which is a TEM, not a SAM. I worked with SAM. And that was fun because I knew exactly that, okay, if somebody wants a 3D picture, now he or she will be able to do it with my software stack, which was not necessarily something that I invented from a software perspective. Not necessarily that I've invented something from nanochemistry perspective, but from the perspective of applied sciences, I just pulled some puzzle pieces together, and that was my PhD. I basically just connected two worlds and said, okay, this is the method. If you want to go, just use those settings. These are samples. You just follow and follow those samples, put your pictures in it, and you'll probably get something like 3D image, and you can just put your glasses on and these red and blue glasses, and you will probably see a 3D picture from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of like it helps maybe to broaden your scope of knowledge, not to narrow and go deep, but just broaden a little bit.
That's really cool. I heard this phrase long time ago that majority of the advancements, well, happens for many reasons, but one of the reason is a care and love and need to help someone. And basically what I'm hearing is you helping someone to do the science with the, like you don't have money to get all the necessary tools, so you kind of like can overcome and like do the things like differently. Wow, this is impressive.
And I had this sort of supervisor in my PhD, and he got some really good points, and because of few articles that I posted on some good journals. So and the points go to him because he's a supervisor. So he was happy. Oh, I'm on a UPAC journal. Oh, that's a UPAC is the organization that designs the periodic table of chemical elements. Oh, okay. So he got points for that. I didn't. But if I'm a supervisor and I get a PhD student, then I will probably get points if I decide to pursue my career further in the Vilnius University.
Okay, yeah, so you touched the career, so let's continue on that one. So your career is really impressive. Like you started work pretty early in university, then transitioned to the banking, transitioned to academia, then back to banking. Can you walk me over a little bit, like the most memorable moments, like in each of the career stages, like, like being the analyst and IT administrator at SEB Bankas, then, like working into Vilnius University, then again getting back to bank and stuff like that. Like this is an early, well, not early, mid to your career. So can you walk me over, like some memorable, stages from that point in your life?
I think that a lot of people have some jobs that initial jobs when they entered the industry, and they actually don't put it on LinkedIn. And I have a few. Some of them I've put on LinkedIn. Some of them I did not. So my first IT job was actually working in an internet cafe. And it was like I had to supervise like 30 PCs, and everybody were playing Counter-Strike or Quake 2, and it was like, oh, okay, I have to figure out that nobody steals RAM from those PCs, or like nobody steals a mouse pad, or nobody just crashes the mouse or keyboard in the motion. And I had to do it 24/7, so in my shift. So that was like my first IT job. I was working as an internet cafe admin. That was fun. I learned how to do ADSL on Linux, how to install Linux router, and actually I started with Linux pretty early in my studies back in school, 1996. Slackware 3.6, Linux kernel 2.2.19. And I've experimented a lot with that, but it was a first job where I actually had the opportunity to apply my Linux skills. I was able to actually stick in a ADSL modem, Ethernet cable, and make it work on a Linux PC, and actually route and translate and masquerade. And that was like, I was sort of like almost I felt like I can do anything with Linux. If I can fly to the moon with Linux. And then I worked briefly as an IT admin in a construction company, which is a local company. I learned a bunch of stuff about wireless there because locations were disconnected. And then in the third year in my studies, I applied for production not operator, but rather production um, sysadmin prod ops. Yeah, probably it was an operator, but formerly it was a system administrator at the SEB Bank, one of the biggest banks in Lithuania. And I spent like 7 years in that bank. They, I think that one of the most important aspects and takeaways from there, it, I moved to an area. I moved to business
Mm-hmm.
after a few years. I moved to business operations just to see, okay, how the life is different uh, outside of the IT bubble, and that experiment actually failed to an extent. I took a lot of good takeaways from there, and to this day, I still maintain good relations with my colleagues there. But I think this non-IT thing, whatever was it, business operations or back end, back office operations, was not for me because every day in my position there as a IT analyst, it wasn't analyst, but I had to use IT. I was not an analyst of like a spreadsheet
Mm-hmm.
analyst. I was doing stuff from, I wrote batch scripts for ladies doing hard work on Windows machines, and they had more time for coffee. I've invented a payments clearing date because I figured out that the systems are sleeping early in the morning, so people could get their funds earlier. It was really a revealing thing, and I had really some good takeaways. And I said, okay, I will probably have to return to IT now. I've seen enough, but I'm an IT person by heart, so let's go back. And yeah, and then I got an opportunity to actually become um, a Vilnius University um, dormitory IT services admin, which brought me to later to a position of head of dormitory IT services at Vilnius University. 5,000 people living in a dorm. They want internet. They want wireless. They want wired. They want amusement. They want to download semi-legal content from internet. They want this and that. They want to learn. They want to play. It's all young people. It's a thrilling experience to actually maintain this, and we had to build it all of that infrastructure by ourselves. So we had to pick a room for a data center. We had to design a data center. What makes a data center? Is the rubber floor okay or not? No, the rubber floor is not okay for a data center because if it burns, then the smoke, the fumes destroy the tracks on the PCBs of the servers. And you had to learn it all the way up to the end of the stack. So it was really a nice ISP job. And yeah, and finally, the last transition, the Danske Bank presence in Vilnius, Lithuania, was yeah, I can say probably a lot. Again, 7 years, like 7 years in Tibet. It changed me completely again when I was a technology person before I joined Danske Bank, and when I joined Danske Bank, I was a platform, a Linux um, uh, engineer, and it transformed to me my attitude towards people and systems. And I left Danske Bank with a thought that IT systems are more deterministic than people, and working with people who work with IT systems is more exciting because you never know what you get. But IT systems are more deterministic in that sense. So, and after 7 years in Danske Bank, I became more empathic. I became more tolerant to people's to my own mistakes, to mistakes of people around me, to imperfections, and I think I one of the best uh, periods of time I had was at Danske Bank because it also allowed us to be responsible for things. Doesn't matter if you're an engineer or if you're a director level, you have the responsibility, and you take responsibility and accountability for your actions, and you just okay, you broke something, you just absorb the damage, you just don't pass it over to your manager, just deal with it. So this extreme ownership thing is something that I really appreciate, and very very nice work culture, and super nice atmosphere we have here in Vilnius in this Danske Bank IT center, which is 4,500 people happily working with a tiny attrition. Yeah, but it's a huge organization. So
I hear you. So I remember I had this question once, and like the question was like, what is the hardest part of migrating, like from one system to another system, and the hardest part is to migrate people, because like as you said, like technology is so easy, it's deterministic, and people, it's just like it's very different. And yeah, I hear you. Like dealing with people has its own challenges, but this is sort of like I guess both you and me, like, or anyone in the computer science, we like solving problems. Like, just give us a problem to solve. People is unsolvable problem. It's always can be solved over and over again. With every different people, they have different problems to solve. So I hear you. Okay.
totally. So we could probably spend another chapter talking about like, okay, how people and technology get along, and how to steer all of this thing, sort of web of people and technology. But let's leave it for another time.
Sounds good. Okay, so so as I understood from your LinkedIn, you and also you did some of the presentations back in a day at Litexpo. You were talking about building a private cloud in Danske Bank, right? Like you were one of the persons working on that, correct?
Correct. And actually, uh, I was. I was doing a lot, except I was not a founding father of that system, because we had a bunch of founding fathers who made some early and good decisions about the architecture, about how private clouds should be built, and I was handed a semi-baked product already, which I had to sort of mature. So my time as a product owner, and I think I had like 5 teams under me just to make sure the product was okay. So we had, front end, back end, and there was tooling. Tooling like, okay, how do you make it like public cloud, but still have it as a private cloud? And we had a strong team of documentation, technical writers. And we also had some UX specialists also to support, so we don't fall back from the, AWS or GCP console in terms of, usability and user experience. So yeah, and that was a journey. And basically, I when I joined, actually, we were building version 0 of that cloud. So I was a Linux engineer. Okay, let's build a Linux system. Let's build an operating system which fits this private cloud. So we worked on that, and it's a never-ending story. You build a server, then you start with the security requirements, you start with compliance, and then you go to, okay, how custom do you want it? What do you want on the top of it? Do you want a middleware? You want a web service? You want a whatever? You want a database, and so on and so forth. And so when I spent like 4 years there, I jumped onto being the team lead for the whole thing, which we already called Cloud 2. So we went for version 0, didn't took off. Version 1 totally flipped, wheels down. Version 2 actually took off. So I went there to be a team leader for all the front end, back end, and other teams there. Actually, I had a really somebody put me on the right track to actually mature the thing so that it becomes usable. And it's supposed to have been, back in the day, people in the banks, like Danske Bank, or I don't know, maybe SEB or Swedbank, they didn't look at public clouds back then. They'll say, oh, how do we build something similar, and so we tried to actually build something similar, so that there was a resemblance in the way you use it. There was a resemblance in the way you actually browse through your assets, and that was after a few years. I think that most of the stuff, I was just visiting Danske Bank the last week, and most of the stuff that I put on the boilerplate before I left is still going that direction, except for the fact that Danske Bank has made a bet to go to public cloud, and they were pretty open about it. And we can talk about those incentives maybe later on. But the private cloud that we built was really backed with some really good architecture, based on open API standards, and those open API standards allowed tooling that was really close to whatever tooling is there on the public cloud. So talking,
Mm-hmm.
Terraform apply, boom, you get everything on prem,
Mm-hmm.
and you can move it, you can change one environment, and you just delete this and start your environment in some other, start your servers and databases and everything in another environment. It was really really flexible and well built. So I could talk also for hours, but I think the most important takeaway is that I think that we reached a point where we got the returns on the investment. Um, because initially it took an effort to build this whole automation, this whole ordering, this whole web shop thing in the with the consoles and statistics and everything. It took an effort to build it, but we pushed it. We sort of we listened to the customers. I think at some point we got some return on investment where people said, "Oh, that was the best thing that I saw since the invention of the light bulb by Thomas Edison." And I was like, "Okay, okay, it's nice to hear. It's a wonderful piece of feedback. We'll continue to we'll carry on and continue to improve on that."
So
So
if I just make a couple things, like you underselling yourself, by saying, but like I wasn't the founding father of, of the everything. I like I was in the similar situation, not maybe on this type of the scale, of the implementation. Like very often founding fathers has an idea but has no idea how to implement that, and the like devil is in the details, and then dealing with all of these details, this is what actually makes the project successful. So I think you put your share part, especially you went to the second version to make this happen. So it's so much familiar, like with what you're saying, but like, yeah, cool.
I
Amazing.
mean, it's like we got some really hated consultants, which we initially sort of didn't like, but those consultants from the outside, they actually evaluated and said, "Oh, this is one of the best products we saw in the Nordics." And yeah, it takes guts to actually kick it off.
Mm-hmm.
It takes guts to actually decide on the initial sort of standard which to follow, and then it takes a lot of guts to actually keep calm and carry on, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the organization of 20,000 people will say, "Oh, I'd like to have this on private cloud. Can we just um, create a new branch infrastructure with a click of a button?
Mm-hmm.
We're building a new branch office in somewhere
Mm-hmm.
in Denmark." I said, "No, it's a private cloud." It's all about saying no. It's all about keeping focus and say, "Okay, we're steering the ship. We can't stop at every stop.
Yeah.
This has to go forward." And this was a lot about saying no in the first place, because the person who left the team for a startup as a team manager, and I joined, so that person always said that I'm the yes man. So I became a no man in that position, because you had to say no to people to actually steer it forward. And the second thing about it is that those consultants that I mentioned in the first place, they actually came up with some. Oh, they were BCG or some big company, Boston Consulting Group
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And they were like, "Yeah, it's a consulting company. They will just making big money here, and they will look at us and say, 'Oh, we're doing fine.' They will leave. They collect their checks." But initially, they came up with this idea where you have this quadrant, and those consultants, what they told and taught us, to focus on the low cost, high value thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this stuck with me and my colleagues there, because with this low cost, high value, we delivered so many good things into that direction we wanted. Because yeah, it takes not a lot of cost to actually provide you. Say, for example, when you build a Linux server, you can provide some small
Mm-hmm.
commands during the initialization of that Linux server, like bash scripts or
Mm-hmm.
cloud init or whatever. It was such a low cost thing. But given that people did not want to type those commands into the server interactively, it was such a high value, because like the whole e-banking was put on this feature, and all of they like when the Unix pipes were invented, they
Mm-hmm.
rewrote the whole Unix thing. So this was the time where they rewrote the whole infrastructure based on this small feature, which allowed to inject a few Linux commands in the startup of a Linux server. And with such features, we actually moved forward in giant leaps, and that was something that those consultants taught us.
Okay. So, after building the private cloud in Danske Bank, you transitioned to the CTO role, then moved to the contracting and, and training, and sort of like, and now at, do you do the Red Hat training? So, does the training and technology feel like a natural expansion to your work, or do you miss your time leadership roles at banks?
When it comes to working with people, uh, being an instructor advocating for a technology to a different set of people every week, you can imagine that you meet a lot of people, a lot of different people with a lot of different competences, and it's this instructor role which I'm in right now. It allows me basically to. It's almost like a CTO role, but it's not. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's not. It's not a CTO role because in my last CTO role, I was working in a company of like, okay, there's a 200 people in a whole group.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you have 40 IT staff, and it's not that complicated as you would be a CTO in a 4,000 IT
Mm-hmm.
organization. But in the sense that you actually deal with people and technology, and if you're saying that, oh, I can advocate this piece of technology, and I can give you some insights why we are teaching you that technology. I think that you sort of you need to stand ground like a CTO does.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to sort of prepare yourself to be able to demonstrate that you are comfortable with that technology, hands on, hands off. It does not sort of it goes both ways. So you need to be frank and vocal about what business goals it helps to achieve. Okay, it's like if you use you can't fly to the moon with Red Hat OpenShift probably, but you can achieve certain business goals. And you need to understand what makes the people successful. So you get a team. You get a new team every Monday,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to make them successful till Friday. So you have to read those expectations. Okay, what are the struggles? Why are you in this training? Oh, my manager said I have to be in this training. Oh, so your manager said, oh, what do you think about OpenShift? And the person goes like, oh, I think that OpenShift is such a complicated technology that as a Swiss person, if I would have to be forced to work with this technology, I'd rather stick to herding cows and living in the mountains. And you have to understand, does that make that person successful, or is the person just doing this because his
Mm-hmm.
manager, his or her manager told so? So that's thing. And it's working with people from many different geographies, communities, countries. You have to understand the work culture. Why are those people? Why everybody is in that country is a VMware admin, or why is it's like why is it always like a classic? They
Mm-hmm.
have this infrastructure which is like a copycat, and then you figure out that the average company size it's sort of like in that country the average company size is less than 200 or less than 100 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it then sort of paints you the big picture, okay, and then this aha moment comes, and then you become empathic with that person and say, oh, I know what you need. You can throw this all away. You'll be fine with the Linux server and a Docker
Mm-hmm.
in the closet, and you will be fine. So, and you have to be frank with this stuff. So I think that ties a little bit being a uh, CTO job, or a person who is advocating to a team of people that we have to pick this or that technology, and being frank about it,
Yeah.
not necessarily by the book, but just frank and say this is good, this is marketing, this is bad, and this is promising, but end of the day it's this.
Okay. So, just like a follow up on this one. So, it's a very interesting, analogy with the, like as I mentioned, like being like a CTO. But the main difference which I see, when you are the CTO, you're making a decision of what to use. Now you're just telling the people, and like if you're passionate, as sometimes I am around my field, like that this is the correct decision, and that they need to choose those, but then they choose to like do completely different things. Like, how do you deal with like you don't have a power to you don't have a power to dictate, because sometimes it's sort of like this is what you need, why don't you do that?
Let me tackle this with a phrase that I've been using a lot in CTO position and before that. If you want to empower the people that you were surrounded with, you have to first of all disempower yourself. So you have to find a dialogue with the class, with your team, with some developer team. You have to strike a balance, okay? Because eventually the people on the ground are going to use that technology. If you're designing on a technology stack as a CTO, you can't just stamp it out and say, okay, we're going to use Tecton now, and nobody knows the heck what Tecton is, but everybody sticks to Jenkins and they say, oh, OpenShift 4 supports this and that. It supports both. Why are we going this path? And you just have to you have to be frank with people, and the CTO position does not sort of give you the power. It does give you that power, but it does not incentivize you to actually make those decisions without speaking to your staff and without understanding the SWOT picture of your staff. What are the strengths and weaknesses? So in the same way, being an instructor, actually, first of all, every Monday I ask, okay, what technology do you work with? Do you like Ubuntu? Do you like Debian? How do you like AppArmor? How do you like this and that? And we have that conversation all the time, and it really helps to make a better picture. And I say, oh, if you're in Linux, you do this. In Ubuntu, you do this, and in Debian, you do that. But in Red Hat, you got SC Linux covered everything. So it's all about dialogue, and and when you are doing this dialogue, you get positive points. You collect those positive points as a leader, and then at some point in time, you spend those positive points by making hard decisions.
Yes.
Saying, now, guys, I know that you love this X, but we have to go with Y, and on that you spend your points that you actually collected with having a healthy dialogue with your teams.
Yeah, I mean, I fully understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. I just, in some of my career path, I maybe have like a wrong CTOs, like which one more like dictated and rather going, like it's you. You mentioned a couple of times like extreme leadership. I assume you might have read the book back in the day, or like, of the same title.
If Jocko Willink's.
Yes.
It's extreme ownership.
Yeah. So exactly, like extreme ownership, and it has this part over there where you need to first get people on your side, explain what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, and then you basically need to have allies as everywhere in the world being able to achieve your goals, and so yeah, makes total sense.
Servant leadership, that's also something that worked for me all the time. I don't know, I was just molded by, okay, what is there for a person that you as a leader can help to achieve this person's goals to the maximum,
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So before, the idea of this is to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure, right? And before we go into that, I wanted just to ask you, do you consider yourself a hardware or a software person?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I'm in a position to say that where the communication is between hardware and people goes really nice, you get a best product. When the combo of software and hardware is really tight. So I used to love Apple products a lot because they do make both software and hardware, and those worlds are blended together. But I think I'm more of like on the software side because hardware is now my hobby. I'm if I would just move the curtain away, you would see the soldering and all the equipment back there to actually do some hardware. But still, it's in a hobby stage, and it's they meet at the point where the operating system sits and controls the hardware. So I may be on that software operating system side more than hardware side.
Got it.
I love reading books about how CPUs work, how stuff is being moved on a physical level, but that does not make me if I know what's a transition look-aside buffer is on a chip, doesn't make me a hardware engineer. Just like a lot of people know that, but not necessarily know how to handle it and how to make the best use of it. So I had one schoolmate in the university who works for Facebook now, and
Hmm.
he calls himself small data engineer, which I like because it's about small bits that are moving in the on the almost on the hardware level, and he could probably call himself maybe a more hardware person than myself.
This is so true. Like I remember, I don't know, like maybe like 9 years ago, I watched this video. Someone was build a small CPU, and they would press a button. Every button would be like a single step in the CPU, and then you realize this is like 1 hertz, and then you have like millions of those happening every second, and now have like gigahertz. So this is like even more happening every second, and then you realize things that like, well, every time we have a breakthrough in software, it doesn't change underlying physics. Physics didn't change. Like any, doesn't matter what kind of software you have, it doesn't change the laws of physics. It still remains the same. It's just like sort of. So that's helped me a lot as a software person, understanding how the hardware works without really being a hardware person. So yeah, and I guess you can relate
Totally.
to that.
Yeah, I can relate, and maybe the physics which is there is just like it's so basic. Like
Yeah.
if you wanna generate, for example, if you wanna generate a clock signal for a CPU, then you get a sine wave. So the sine
Yeah.
wave is sort of like it goes up and
Yes.
down, but you wanna generate a clock signal. How do you generate that? So you make a fork of that sine signal, and you delay one patch line on the
Hmm.
CPU, uh, sort of like few millimeters or nanometers, so that the sine wave gets delayed because of the speed of light, and then you blend them together to form a sort of more of a like a square wave. And this is how most of the, or I should say probably almost all of the clock waves on the CPUs are generated, because there is a delay which makes sort of like speed of light, not the speed of light, but maybe it makes a signal traveling at the speed of light to come slower, and sum it up, and then you get this clock signal, which
Yeah.
is fascinating. You just see like uh, a long sort of left and right thing on the PCB, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's physics, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's we like, oh, we are computer science. Like no, we're not scientists. Sorry. I mean, maybe some people are. I don't think I am, but like anyway. Okay, so let's move to the cloud. So like you spent some time with building the private cloud, and I did know. We all know the public cloud. There is also a term on premises, which like you as an expert, can you sort of like explain me the difference between like public, private, on-prem? Are it the same things? Are they all different? Like what's sort of like a like a 101 about the cloud differences?
Okay, so public cloud is OpEx. You know what OpEx is,
No.
right? No, operational expenses.
Okay.
Uh, so private cloud is not necessarily OpEx. It's just electricity, which is OpEx. It's
Hmm.
it's capital expense if you capitalize on, if you have things like physical things. I'm not a CFO to talk capex OpEx, but I think that the public clouds have made today are built today to facilitate at a lower cost entry level organizations, where they sort of they have the margins start to grow together with the growth of the customer. So, and I think that the key uh, key differences between public and private cloud is stuff that you actually own and stuff you actually don't own,
Hmm.
right? So you want to own things or you don't want to own things, and I'm biased a little bit because I work for a company which is betting heavily on a hybrid model, which is public and private all together combined, but my heart always falls for the private cloud because of not necessarily that it is a default choice and a good choice for many companies, but because it's a clockwork, and you will only see that clockwork ticking after you get to the point of where you get the returns on your
Hmm.
investment. And not all companies are capable of reaching that, because of the product complexity, the infrastructure that is necessary to build. So a lot of companies just choose public clouds because they don't want to own the infrastructure. They think that they will probably be better off by having not so much knowledge about underlying, networking hardware and the physical sort of cooling and whatever stuff that is there to build a data center. And they sort of they make a bet that they will be better off
Mm-hmm.
doing public cloud. So, well, private cloud is a sort of is a state where you have where you make a bet or you make a conscious decision that it's going to fare better because you will have more control over the stuff which is there with all the consequences. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you can choose a patching cycle on your private cloud yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, are you going to do this at all? The patching cycle of the network hardware, of the testing, electricity, conditioning, and everything. So you make a conscious or semi-conscious choice to decide whether you want to own stuff or not. And I think that there is a certain hype
Mm-hmm.
because when you start small, in the startup community, you don't start like with a zillion of dollars backing you initially. You're looking for VC or private capital funded,
Mm-hmm.
and that almost all the time throws you on the public cloud because the public clouds are doing their, I think the pricing model and the margins that they lower the margins for the entry level, right? And then sort of you get the bang for the buck. You can always pull out while
Mm-hmm.
you in the early stage, but the public clouds, they are business companies. They
Mm-hmm.
want to benefit. They want to profit from you. So when you grow, they probably would like to benefit from your growth as well. So the whole thing is built to benefit. So the more you grow, I think the more you sort of help the public cloud with the profits. And I think that is okay. But then you can ask yourself a question
Mm-hmm.
whether you still want to uh, you know share your ROIs
Mm-hmm.
with the public cloud provider on the infrastructure, or you want to just to get all the returns to yourself.
I
and
see.
then and then you make a choice, and that's all about making a choice, a calculated choice or semi-calculated choice. And I think we can probably also talk about cost, and that is a driving factor. Technologies, you can have a S3 equivalent, Linux, Windows servers, databases, whatnot on prem, on your premises
Mm-hmm.
or on some other premises like which you control.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about technology mostly. It is mostly about the cost. And once we talk about the cost, there are some interesting things to look why people choose to move to public cloud. Is it cheaper? No, but
Mm-hmm.
there are reasons. So
Yeah. So when you were building, like a private cloud, like why did you decided to build a private cloud instead of the leveraging on the public cloud options? Like, is it because of the industry requirements, or was more like like back in your Danske Bank days?
I think that the industry was in such a state that there were unclear regulations,
Mm.
maybe, or the regulations were clear, but it was difficult to interpret them. To say, oh yeah, can we run Swift on public
Mm-hmm.
clouds? Can we run, PCI DSS on public clouds? And at that time, the industry, it was simply not there. If you want to build a credit card infrastructure on the public cloud, it just doesn't meet the Visa or Mastercard requirements. So you have to figure out a third party provider or whatever. So, but slowly the products started to emerge, like security zone, zero trust security, PCI DSS, and the public clouds slowly gained
Mm-hmm.
those products into their portfolio. But it was basically not out of thin air. It was probably Microsoft sitting with a huge customer like
Yeah.
Barclays Bank or HSBC and say, "Oh, if you would disclose us the PCI DSS or this environment requirements, we will probably be able to build something
Mm-hmm.
really equivalent to this on the public cloud." And the process went on, and to my mind, once the requirements from few customers have been shared to the public cloud
Mm,
providers, then Azure Cloud suddenly got a PCI DSS environment, and then from 2 or 3 customers, now they are able to serve probably
yeah.
20 or 30. So they got the win because they sort of somebody shared those requirements, not as they are on the paper, but like, oh, this is how the real life
Yes.
situation looks like, right?
Yeah. I understand that. So we kind of like talk, like why do people like why do companies move to the starts in the public cloud? Because like you're small, you don't really have like a like an ops person for you to help, so kind of like just want to get in. But like, when do you think companies decides to move back to the private? Like, again, you also mentioned when the cost is not doable or when you want to own stuff, but yeah, so kind of like already answer all of those. So if you could just like
I can put you
yeah.
through another example. It's always like a sine wave. It's okay to be in motion. It's
Yeah.
like when you're traveling all the time. You have all your stuff packed, so you can account for all your infrastructure if you are constantly in motion. So there is nothing wrong about going either way,
Yeah.
because the motion, it's better than just to sit on the sofa and you just like you pet your old data center and hope that it's going to survive another outage. But it puts you to motion, and you sort of you delete, you decommission stuff which is no longer required
Mm-hmm.
or necessary for your business, and you shave that off, and you become lean maybe. And lingering back on your question, what made Danske Bank move? I think that in the first place, the move was made just because the existing service provider was doing a not so high quality private cloud services. It was all handmade, so that back in the day, a lot of things were handmade, and it was not flexible, repetitive, and so we decided to standardize that,
Mm-hmm.
and the standardization allowed growth. Like, okay, we said, uh, you know, 20 servers. What is that? 2015, 2020, it was almost like 8,000 servers.
Mm-hmm.
So it was scalable. So we
Got it.
made the thing scalable. It wasn't about bringing somebody from public cloud.
Mm-hmm.
It was to an extent because some highly skilled people said, "Oh, we just can't wait 1 week for a Linux machine.
Yeah.
We go to public cloud and we build the stuff there." So we actually had to later on join two worlds together, which is uh, to certify that our private cloud
Mm-hmm.
is capable of hosting a cloud native solution, and it was actually with some effort.
Yeah.
It's not an equivalent. It's not a copycat from AWS.
Got it. Got it. Uh, so okay, kind of like almost done with the cloud. So you yourself right now work with the Red Hat, right? Like for Wave, but like everything about the Red Hat. Red Hat as a technology, please correct me if I'm wrong, can run off both the public or the private clouds. Like whenever you in AWS, you actually can select the Red Hat operating system out of there, right? Now, so the question is like when like consulting people, like do you feel that the company's trend is to move from public to private or from private to public, or like it's various?
In my bubble, I think that there is a slight trend to go on prem.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that my previous employer, Danske Bank, is moving
Mm-hmm.
everything to public cloud right now, but we know that the trends in large enterprises, they are sort of delayed a little bit. A few years back, like if we go back to 2015, and DevOps in an enterprise was a new thing, like DevOps was already there, and I think containers was already there, but DevOps in an enterprise had to be a slogan,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that the large companies that move slow, like cruise ships, uh, could actually catch on that phrase
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Oh, we have to do DevOps as well." So I think that big companies, they're probably moving to public clouds as we speak,
Mm-hmm.
but just because they are sort of lagging behind, maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
behind those trends. And if you open up Hacker News like Y Combinator or
Yeah.
equivalent news sources, you will see from time to time cost savings stories that do like 10 times cost saving if people moving their stuff from AWS to a Hetzner or
Yeah.
their own infrastructure, or they move from public cloud service to simply infrastructure as a service.
Yeah.
So I think that this journey again, it costs less on the operational
Mm-hmm.
side, but you have to have some capital or some good human resources to compensate for that. And it's a balance, of course. It's like, do you want somebody to actually take care of the network? Yeah, of course, just hire a bunch of network engineers, and then you'll be able to build further the data center or whatever. Like if you have a closet, just put some Linux
Yeah.
server, air conditioning, and probably it's going to be 2 gigabits of local ISP, and you'll be able to serve your startup from there.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so I there, like it feels like the cloud is just like, and there is so much you can talk about that in there, and like like the person's salary, like as just mentioned, like if you have your own stuff, you need to own the things, you need to think of the human factor, you need to think of the different time zones. If you're in the public cloud, you kind of like don't really need to think, but then you actually need to think about that. So it's a different level of the requirements what you want to do. But as I said, like let's not go there. So couple like, do you agree or disagree question. So moving to the cloud with ultimate resources, engineers forget how to optimize. Agree or disagree?
I would say might be the case.
Yeah.
I've seen so many servers with 8 cores running one thread, and it was like, oh, come on, like, do you really need that? Because sometimes this, again, it's related to cost. If you're paying paper money
Yeah.
inside an organization for a private cloud, you just forget to optimize, right? So it's easy to slip and just overbook. Oh, private cloud is out of resources, so let's book extra servers and just make sure if we want to survive a sort of like a Black Friday, we'll put those servers to work.
Yeah.
So they don't optimize that well because it's complicated to account for a good cost model
Mm-hmm.
in the private cloud, because you pay the cleaning lady, you pay for the housing. How do you split the housing equally
Yeah.
for a virtual machine? That's an ultimate question. It's trending towards the, yeah. Sometimes people just don't optimize. It's just like, oh, let's order all we can order now and figure out the bill later.
Got it. And then the next one. So, would you agree or disagree? When you're on-prem, it's much harder to innovate because everything is balanced, like and there is no space left for a new project to do. Like an example would be, I remember we wanted to do some data project and I got hard no just because our Hadoop infrastructure didn't had enough of resource to support the new project which we're working around.
Oh, the innovation. I think you speaking. You're talking scaling.
Yes.
So scaling is a complex thing in the private cloud, because you have to you have to saturate your private cloud to an extent, right? So if you're buying a bunch of racks of servers, you have to saturate them with some workload,
Yes.
so that they don't idle, because idling is just electricity. It's just like a few watts here and there, but you buy the machine. So you have to saturate. You have to always make sure that your private cloud is saturated well enough and is paying the bang for the buck. Um, does that stop innovation? It depends.
Okay.
Because if you're lacking space on a Hadoop cluster, that's a scaling thing.
Yeah.
If you're lacking a feature on Hadoop and you're waiting for people somewhere in other geography to actually make an upgrade,
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe an innovation question. Because
Okay.
innovation is always at your own expense. If you want to upgrade all the RabbitMQ clusters or all the Hadoop clusters or all the Kafka clusters in your estate, you have to make sure that you're in control, of course, but you have to make sure that you do it in such a way that it doesn't harm your business things
Yeah.
that are running on top of that. And I can give you a very simple example. Like if we're talking servers and clouds, let's say let's talk Excel formulas. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a salary spreadsheet, like an HR spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
calculating salaries. And if you have it on like on SharePoint locally, then you're in control. If you have it on the public cloud on Office 365, you're not in control. If somebody changes a damn function
Mm-hmm.
on the Office 365 and it kind of just blows your whole salary calculation away, then you would probably choose control over innovation, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's sort of I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I think that it's always at your own expense.
Yes.
If you have the money to innovate, you can innovate.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always devil in the details.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of like myself, like I'm data engineer, and I, we started, in the private cloud with our data infrastructure. Now we move to, like the public, and like you said, like kind of like you a little bit, you personally would love to stay in the, like on-prem for the thing. So I myself see a lot of benefits when I compare the CPU hour cost, which we pay on our premises, and how much we pay on in the AWS cloud. It's just like, like just mind blowing, the difference between, of course, like there is the other operational costs, the people like plugging in the servers, making sure they are replacing, buying the hardware and all the other things, which I don't see or not put into the, into my formulas. But anyway, if let's say, like company, so let's make a thought experiment, right? Let's say you are hired and we want to build the data infrastructure on-prem. Now, to build the data infrastructure on-prem, we can make it very simple, right? So we need three components, like is in every, like database. We need to have a storage, we need to have a compute, and we need to have, like RAM. Now, of course, like in public, what you would do, you would have S3. S3 gives you, like a stability, it's, like spans across, but it's sort of like, like goes there. Now, if you would need to build or architect such a solution, so what would be, like the tools or applications or services you would suggest to use? And please feel free to pro any products in here as you like, or, like any open source stuff which is available.
Okay, so you hit me on two spots where I'm sort of like super weak. My worst experience is like I'm least experienced in storage, and
This is the hardest one. Trust me. In data,
yeah.
this is the hardest one.
So I was trying to, I was always in the favor of having stateless workloads and blah blah. It's just like keeping myself away from the storage world. If you want to build on-prem, I think that a very important thing that you didn't mention is that you have to have also network on premises, which
Yeah.
is a key thing because it just connects everything. And I think that I would, and many of the companies also choose to opt in for a really, really good storage provider. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be open source.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are a bunch of like NetApp, VMware, and other storage providers that are really, really doing the job well in terms of being S3 compatible, in terms of actually having the data redundant, but most importantly also having the data tiered
Mm-hmm.
in not in a single dimension,
Mm-hmm.
but they give you that flexibility and to actually arrange your storage
Mm-hmm.
in the flavors that you will later on use for your compute. Compute is basically RAM and CPU together,
Yes.
maybe, but we can split them apart. But it's always
No.
something that goes along, and that storage is also something that you would probably uh, want to share the responsibility with an expert
I agree with you.
company,
Yeah,
with
that's
an expert vendor.
I agree with you completely. Just for my personal interest, so when you're talking about like a storage vendor, do you say that you would buy a special box and put it on premises, or you would buy the service and then use the network, like something like it still would be in the public cloud in the infrastructure, and you just sort of like would have the network, moving data back and forth?
Well, I mean, if we were building this on private cloud, so we should not extend it to the public
Mm-hmm.
cloud.
Okay.
If we're playing this game fairly. So
Yeah.
you have to have everything on prem, and then you will probably have a bunch of hardware just to
Mm-hmm.
support that demand for storage, and that would be mostly flash. Probably depends
Mm-hmm.
on your tiering. But yeah, the best thing that you could probably get to invest in a good storage vendor, and maybe into two, so you don't put
Okay.
all your eggs into one basket.
Okay.
So when you design
Mm-hmm.
your storage is going to be designed into multiple tiers and multiple directions and dimensions of tiers.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get cold, warm, hot, and you will probably be uh, doing it. Okay, is it deduplicated?
Mm-hmm.
Is it not? Is it duplicated inside data center, across data center, active, 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 passive, so on and so forth? You probably will be designing this, and maybe based on this design, on your requirements, you will probably pick I would say minimum of two vendors
Mm-hmm.
that will support your storage, your backups as well, and all the all the tiers that you selected. And yeah, if you say S3 compatible,
Mm-hmm.
most of the vendors they do S3 compatible things, and of course Red Hat does this Open Data Foundation thing, which is basically Ceph,
Mm-hmm.
which can do block and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of network things as well. So yeah, you have to build your own hardware for this. Do you have the resources
Yeah.
for that as well? Are you going to just simply uh, you know do you want to externalize the risk, or you want to internalize the
Mm-hmm.
risk of your storage just blowing apart? That's the decision that is made on the C level, maybe, or
Yeah.
somebody who working with risk, and the business continuity. And then you say, oh, we probably might use for this extension of our storage team
Mm-hmm.
that the vendor is giving us. Like Red Hat is operating mostly in the support world as an extension to the Linux
Mm.
platform or operating system team. So likewise, the storage vendors are doing this. And of course, if you're like in a cowboy mode, you can do everything yourself. But storage is hard. So yeah, let's just I would pick a vendor which has a proven trail of good service.
So thank you very much. Really, really genuinely thank you, because I always thought this is, like either or. Like it's you need to go either, like if it's on prem, you basically like I don't know, like you open my mind. Like you're absolutely right. Like if you're on premises, it doesn't mean that you need to build everything open sourced. You sometimes, like you good to get yourself for the critical pieces, like get someone who actually already did that hundreds and hundreds of times, because you pay for that, things. And in the data world, the data is the most important thing. Like our, like query engines or compute part is stateless. They don't care about, they don't need to have anything in there, but the data needs to be there. So I do really appreciate that's a
I
very
mean,
good point. Yeah.
if you're leveraging, if you do have 5 petabytes of data,
Yeah.
and if you buy if you build a solution for yourself with all the risks, I think that with a little bit of an increased cost, you will
Yeah.
get probably a contract which will say that somebody, uh, given there is a fault on your
Yeah.
data center, somebody will fly in the next 24 hours and make a replacement of that hardware and just fly out without even you noticing
Mhm.
that. That's a good deal. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's a good starter. And if you're that is nothing bad, intrinsically bad, of
Mhm.
actually picking up a closed source
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, as long as you don't have all the eggs
Yeah. Yeah.
in that basket, you can pick two companies, you can pick two vendors. Maybe one is a uh, equivalent or a model where you can get an open source version of it, and the company is actually doing their pros in that open source product. That's also a thing, and I've been doing this with Chef, for example.
Mhm.
So Chef is not storage, but it used to have this model where you can survive with open source, and you can always go back to an open source version of it. Yeah, well, you'll have command line instead of
Mhm.
nice web UIs, right? So, but you will have that if you're out of money, if you're running out of like runway,
Mhm.
you can fall back to open source, and the same way you could have fall back with Red Hat to CentOS,
Mhm.
and if you're and somebody will be able to actually recover you from that situation, maybe. So same with storage as well.
Yeah. That's it's kind of like it's amazing. Yeah, perfect. So then the next one, which I have, which sort of like, I guess everyone is asking this question as well. So when you do, like in the ETLs, we do a lot of batch processing, right? And this much of the batch processing is like is very, like compute heavy. And the question which I have, like, so like it feels that like you would need to provision the hardware to the peak capacity of the batch processing which you're running. Like, is it just like a normal thing? Like, I guess like when you are in the cloud for many years, like you have this sort of feeling like, how can you make sure that your service is not running, because a running service is a cost. So when you're looking at the prem, I kind of have this feeling like if you have an instance, or sorry, if you have a a machine which you bought and it's idling, it's basically like it's bad, it costs money, which is true, it does cost money, but is it really bad to have an idling machine and just better over provision for the things on prem? Or like, what would be the economics in here?
So there was always a problem actually to scale, like you're saying. Hadoop does not have resources because the resources are pre-allocated to somebody who is doing like a Black Friday sales or whatever. So there is always this thing of, okay, how saturated do we keep our private cloud? Do we account for these spikes, and do we not account for these spikes? And that is a question where I think that most of the banks and financial institutions, they survive with uh, offloading some of the workloads to this big old good mainframe, which is batch optimized.
Okay.
So, but again, you can't offload everything to a mainframe, and mainframes are again on-prem. I haven't seen a mainframe which is like a cloud thing. You have IBM Cloud, and you can probably get an AIX machine on the cloud, but not much. So how to account for these spikes in a private cloud, it has been always an issue. But you will always have some buffer zone for your private cloud, because there are spikes, A. B, because there are demands for new Hadoop projects. C, there is a general demand for new servers, new orderings, and new bookings on your private cloud web shop or whatever you have there. So and once you reach the point of a scale, those individual peak loads, they get distributed more evenly, and you have morning, you have night, you have week time, you have weekends. Of course, your systems might be idling on weekends, but you are sort of organize your work that a lot of stuff happens on the evenings or whatever weekends. You patch machines on your weekends, and that is sort of like the question: how to share the resources in such a way that we can also accommodate for the new demand, for new projects, for sizing of existing instances, and of course for the peak loads. And there is no silver bullet for that. I don't recall any silver bullets. Might be a case where a company like Dell or EMC or whatever companies at the top right now, they can give you a sort of like an overspill data center at their premises to say, hey guys, if you need, we have a vCenter running over there. If you want to overflow your peak loads, you can leverage that. So they're playing in that game of saying, okay, there are different geographies, different time zones, different whatever. So we have this data center where you can just spill over, given that you're in a resource bottleneck and you're sort of fully booked on your private cloud. But hey, we have this private cloud over here, and you can just buy some time. But again, there is no cloud. There is just it's somebody else's computer, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And so the companies like Dell, IBM, the hardware vendors that they have low margins on actually getting their own data centers running. So they say, oh, we have a running thing here. Just spill it over. So
Yeah,
maybe that's a one of a small tiny silver bullets.
So you basically again got back into hybrid mode, right? Like this is like feels like a very natural progression. We tried all in cloud, we tried on private, and like now maybe the actual answer is somewhere in the middle. But
I can tell you a hybrid mode is your company's engineer doing custom wiring in an Amazon data center.
mm-hmm,
You
yeah,
know, and that's a real thing. I'm not saying which company and which person is that, but that's a real thing. So it ends up being customized,
yeah, yeah,
and it's sort of like you will get you're taking this private public cloud as a standard way of doing things, but yeah, there are some workloads like 5 to 1, maybe 1% of your workloads that require this cabling like this, or patching like that, or some compute things platforms like this. So
yeah.
and then you get your it feels like you're in your own data center, which you're obviously not, but still.
So I have like two more extra questions about all the cloud, like stuff and on premises and stuff like that. So one of the scare thing which I have, especially dealing with the data, is the egress cost, right? So it's very hard to have a hybrid cloud when all your data is in S3, and I don't remember the exact price right now. It's like $10 per terabyte. Whenever your data is leaving the AWS, it's just like a massive, like overhead which you need to pay. And for that reason, it sort of like feels, well, AWS, what they do, they just saves the, like they have a storage for free, well, cheap, right? And then they need somehow to pay for that storage, so they just
Recover
pay,
their margins, yes.
right? So that's course of going like, so this is my concern with hybrid clouds, is the egress costs. It sort of feels that everyone does that, but at the same time, and the sub question to all of that, the same issue is when you are a big organization which is split across regions. Like, for example, our company is in US, is in Europe, and we do have two data centers. One of the big problem and one of the reasons why we moved to a public cloud is because moving data between clouds, like you need to have data localized in one area to run your compute, right? So moving those over the network was challenging. So kind of like choosing as a cloud as a singular point, just kind of like, like push that, like sounded like a reasonable thing. So two questions: egress cost, like do you think anything will happen in there? And then at the same time, like how do you deal with the egress cost, which is now your network latency, when you actually have multiple, data centers?
Okay, so I think that I'm a bad predictor. What's going to be? I mean, public clouds are going to charge you more generally. Like every time
Mm-hmm.
they feel that you've been grown enough to actually not churn
Mm-hmm.
and not to go elsewhere or not to go private, they will keep charging you for the stuff to keep you on the public side.
Yeah.
So that is something like egress doesn't cost. Just go there, just put your stuff. Oh, you want to pull out? Okay, that's your bill. But I think that this is going to be, and they're playing a smart game, because at the end of the day, they are benefiting as a company. Every public cloud
Mm-hmm.
provider has this goal of actually be profitable,
Of course.
and there is no charity public cloud, right? So they are basically trying to find a way where, yeah, either they go cheap and they allow you to sort of increase your presence at their side, and if you want to decrease your presence on their side, whatever, you're moving out the data, moving the servers, or just copying files, whatever, they will just keep the costs high. And that is I think that there are a bunch of smart people working for AWS, Azure, and GCP to actually follow those trends. Okay, are we doing hybrid clouds now? What products are there just for hybrid cloud management? Oh, you have this Red Hat console which does this nice hybrid thingy. Oh, probably is going to fare well. So let's just adjust the prices based on what this product
Mm-hmm.
actually or the features what this product gives. And yeah, on the side of, okay, how do you keep your hybrid cloud alive? I'm not an expert on this because I didn't work much with a hybrid per
Mm-hmm.
se cloud. So mostly private and a little bit of I've been 2 years
Mm-hmm.
hands-on GCP, but I think that it might be there might be a case of a clearing at some particular scale when you have one team moving the stuff to the public cloud and other ones to pull down, and maybe you say, oh, you want to guys just switch servers and just
Mm-hmm.
don't copy the data, just somehow optimize this so that you don't just move things back and forth. Just make a clearing. Okay, it's like you can use that server. This is good. You just like stop that app. That's sort of my imagination in terms of platform workloads. But if you're really moving files, I don't think that you can do much about it. It's just like as long as you're, ooh, I would rather say let's pull it from our backups, and the backups should be not on the same public side. You have to have your. Some people just have their confluences printed and somewhere stored here with all the numbers of the vendors and emergency contacts. So yeah, that's the cost of having your eggs in one basket, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, right, and the final one which I have about all this. So I myself recently got my hands into Kubernetes. The more I think about that, the more I look around it, the more I am fascinated about, like the software of what it provides and sort of, and what I'm trying to say by it, my question is related to the Kubernetes, but not necessarily. It's just like a technology, right? It's like it feels to me that you need to have some sort of glue to be able to connect the private and public or any other clouds together, right? Like, so it feels like Kubernetes is one of those glues. Like, do you agree? Or there is like more glues we could choose from? Like when you want to deploy a workload, Kubernetes feels like it gives you an infrastructure where you can do that. You just add a new machine, you register that as a worker, and it sort of works.
But just from the business perspective, if I'm a public cloud provider, am I incentivized to give an exactly the same grade of Kubernetes service to my customers as the other cloud providers do? No, I'm not. I'm willing to give a competitive advantage. I'm willing to give a feature. Because of that feature, people will just influx to my service. So there is a catch. So there are no two same Kubernetes public cloud providers. Although the idea is that the Kubernetes is the API which is sort of unifying and stuff, which is sadly not, because the public cloud is not only about putting stuff on Kubernetes. It's about taking care of Kubernetes, life cycling and all of stuff that the public clouds are competitive. So as long as they're competitive, there is not going to be a thing that will make all the Kubernetes and OpenShifts or maybe OpenShifts is a different question, but it's not going to be a same Kubernetes across the cloud providers, because then you will just simply choose it by whatever, the price, maybe, but people want to also have some extra stuff to it.
So you mentioned a couple times OpenShift. Would you mind briefly share what it is? But like this is like something from the Red Hat, and now as you mentioning those in the question of the Kubernetes, they somehow related. Just my personal interest.
OpenShift is a Kubernetes distribution.
Okay.
You answered my question. Do you use Linux yourself? Like at work or for servers?
And for servers, yes.
Just think of a case where you use Linux, right?
Yeah.
So do you use a Linux kernel, or do you use a distribution system?
So what do we use? I don't know. That's a question for the ops.
No. Just don't mind the specifics. But would you rather use just a Linux kernel, naked stripped kernel thing, or you would use a distribution?
Of course, distribution. Yes. Okay. Got it.
So that's like, would you use Kubernetes like as a kernel for stuff, or would you use the whole distribution of OpenShift, where you have metrics, you have monitoring, you have logging, you have developer experience, you have builds, you have stuff. So this is like an open source product.
Okay. And does OpenShift also integrates with the different cloud providers if you would need to? It should, because you just buy the EC2 instance and you're done, right?
You can buy Rosa on AWS and you will get a control plane OpenShift. You just throw worker nodes to it, and OpenShift is Kubernetes. It's every OpenShift release just follows a Kubernetes release.
Understood.
So it doesn't go.
Okay.
You can use kubectl for OpenShift.
So, dear Red Hat, this could have been your ad, but now we're cutting it off. So
I can speak open source. So Red Hat is a fantastic company which has zero closed source products.
Oh, that's
If
nice.
if if it finds a product that is closed source, it throws a bunch of people to make it open source because that's the idea of the company, just to be open source. And we can speak about a couple of beers. Why is that so? But thank you
Yeah.
for the time today. It was a really, really revealing and experience to speak out a little bit about the stuff I've been through.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so hot topics in data, AI, and NVIDIA, right? And I don't want to go into AI. Well, before going into AI, like, I don't know how you. I personally felt that blockchain is is a crap. It's a bunch of BS. I'm sorry, but I don't really understood that like benefit of all of that. But like now with the AI, it's such a it's such a big hype right now. I see benefits, but these like, do you think is there a lot of hype around the AI right now, or do you think it's just sort of like like something actually is happening, and we just have this sort of like awareness, like a massive amount of hype, or it's just a hype?
Well, you mentioned blockchain and
Yeah.
cryptocurrencies. There was a bit of hype. So and the thing settled down where it's supposed to have settled. So in 10 years of cryptocurrencies and blockchains, we haven't seen much of the practical
Yes.
applications of blockchain. And to this day, I don't have any blockchain around myself here, unless I don't know, but maybe. So same thing goes with AI. So, but AI is sort of scratching this a little bit. We see a trend, changing trends in the job industry. So people that were making and doing repetitive work, they sort of move on to maybe do some more clever work because of the help of AI. Because AI is pretty much a sort of a hallucinating representation of the all the knowledge that all the humans on our planet does, but it's sort of it's not a person,
Yeah.
it's not a personality. So, and it's not being perceived as a personality or a person to which you can relate, listen, commit, and maybe share your experience back and forth. So as long as it's not a personified thing, so it's not going to find place between humans.
Yeah.
You can do, AI is good for basic things. So if your job was doing basic stuff, you're probably jobless as of now. But
Yeah.
well, maybe there's an opportunity to move to something more advanced. And the AI, I saw this very nice trend in the Linux community that AI is actually good at one thing. Is AI is very good. It's crappy writer of code,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like the boilerplate code that it gives. It's total nonsense. But suddenly, the twist of like the tables turn in such a way that it's capable of explaining code
Mm-hmm.
really nice. So maybe it's going to find a product market fit in this. And I know that the Linux kernel guys are really designing a language model that would say, okay, this is a part of Linux kernel, and this is going to be that having that risks impact that thing, this thing, and just that model will be able to sort of paint the big picture because it's complicated really. But in the practical world applications, I think it's just like just shaving off basic people jobs. So the technology does not make us happier.
Mm-hmm.
The technology, all the technologies that we've been through over the last 40 years, it's just making our lives move faster,
Mm-hmm.
not happier. Just
Yes.
like you just make things faster. Like AI does certain things faster, and that's it.
So I do agree again. What a surprise with you on what you said. Like I found myself, like when coding on some personal projects, like using the Copilot, right, which sort of like helps with some of the code to be written. And I just
Right.
sometimes find like, oh, this is great. Like back in the day, I would need to write all of these function or copy paste the same function. Like for example, I was doing some sort of like load from, like for a certain model, load from X or something. And then when you have like 10 different models, which have like a different fields, but the idea is the same, you basically need to do a lot of copying. And what the Copilot was able to do, I basically start writing, and it's already backfills, also, the code, how I would write it, because it's very clear what I want to do. So that's sort of, very helpful. Why I'm sharing this is what I heard, and what I do agree is that AI will not take a work from the software engineer, but a person using AI tools will. So if you're not using the tools to improve your work, then it's, you should be careful with that. So because the repetitive work is not fun, and it's also, and if the tool can help us, I think that's just a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, totally. If you can generate a boilerplate code really nicely, it's a lot of work usually. Say for example, Angular boilerplate code is huge or whatever. So if that thing can do that nicely in such a way that you can understand and be accountable for your code, and you have an advantage, of course.
Yeah.
It's just like you should probably not put yourself into a position where you just blindly accept what it says. And the more risky part is you should not probably put the mechanism AI thing to actually do a code review on the code that is written by AI because it will probably agree. And so you have to always have this sort of human and AI thing where AI it just doesn't make things smarter. It makes things faster. You just have to think less about it because you will probably write that code anyway, and you will have to understand and be accountable because no AI can be held accountable over that code because you will be producing and committing this on your own name, right? So you're accountable. So you have to understand, like in university, you submit a task to a lecture and you have to be accountable. It doesn't matter who wrote it. Is it your friend, your mom, or your whatever?
Yeah, that's so true. And moving forward, when it comes to building the AI infrastructure, do you think companies should invest in building in-house or just rent it from the cloud providers? I mean, like, you don't really train models that often, right? Like you train models and then you use them. So like, what would be your take on this?
I think that depends on how the core of the business is dependent on this. So if you're ready to put all the stakes on some, Chat GPT, where it's going to, someday, oh, oops, it just changed from charity to from non-profit to a profit, and it's going to change completely the pricing of API, or somebody else will take over, and you will see like somebody like Elon Musk taking over and changing the charging scheme again. If you're ready to actually build a business on this hectic environment, then probably you should take that risk. And if something happens on this cloud provider that you are not sort of aligned with, you will probably lose your business. But if you can survive with that risk, or you can build 20 different products on different topics, and maybe say, okay, some of them will survive. But again, building AI infrastructure is something that companies should probably not should not miss the opportunity to invest to some good staff inside their own companies, just to make sure that they know what they're doing. It doesn't matter public or private cloud. And I think that the big tech is slowly pushing towards democratizing the AIs. So there are a bunch of ways of actually having a good model on premises. And I tried out the Instruct Lab myself. Just open source. You just pip install Instruct Lab, pick a NVIDIA CUDA driver, and just download the IBM open source models. And it just, I know it can explain what's the difference between Vilnius and Riga. It can explain differences between CentOS and Ubuntu, but it's just 5 gigs, so you can train it yourself with your company data, grow the model, and you will have a chat or any kind of other services that are usually built around LLMs. So AI is being slowly open sourced, thanks to the work of IBM, Meta, and to some extent Red Hat as well.
So the last question about AI and NVIDIA. So I put it NVIDIA in here because I wanted to ask like a little bit, and this might be like totally out of your, like what you do and stuff like that. But like, I'm just curious, like, what's your thought on the NVIDIA? It just like became so powerful so fast. They have so much money. They building all of these things. I watched one of their keynote when they were presenting this massive, I don't even know, like a bunch of GPUs stacked in a single like in the single stackable, whatever the thing which you put in the servers are called, and then bunch of those stacked together, sort of like a single massive GPU, which then connected through their like infinity bandwidth network or whatever the technology they use. Like for me, it's like you mentioned in the beginning, like like some of the banks offload some of the load in the mainframes. So please help me understand, because I have the lack of knowledge on this one. So I know back in the day we have the single computer and your application needs to fit into your RAM and disk, and that's on the single machine. Then later, we did vertical scaling where we add more, CPU, internal cores, RAM, and so on. Then we went into horizontal scaling where now suddenly using the network, we actually can distribute the work across. Now for the GPU training models, it's sort of like it's very complex because they cannot really spread the computations around. They sort of like need to keep everything in memory. I might be wrong here, but this is sort of like my understanding is. So now it feels like NVIDIA is building like a mainframe where everything is vertically scalable because it sees as a single massive GPU. Is this what is happening, or I'm reading it completely wrong?
Actually, I have to be a little bit educated on NVIDIA and initiated on their strategy. So I'm not sure, entirely sure what
It's
is
fine.
the sort of. I think that what it comes to my mind is that NVIDIA itself. I'm going just to put my own perspective to NVIDIA, which I'm more sure of. That NVIDIA recently got a more. It became a more open company.
Okay.
In terms of what they do.
Okay.
If you look at the comments of Linus Torvalds, for example, who is the author of Linux, he used to give them a finger. If you remember, maybe there is a famous speech where he gave the company the middle finger.
Okay.
Because of they were not disclosing their internals, drivers, specifications, and I think that one of the things I love about NVIDIA now as a company, that they're doing more and more open stuff.
Okay.
And with doing open stuff, they're sort of growing their community. And probably that has some impact on the overall profits or whatever, that they are able to do more R&D maybe and do the stuff that you mentioned. But I think that the tables have turned in such a way that Linus Torvalds is now regretting, because the picture of him showing the middle finger to NVIDIA is all over the internet now, and you just can't remove it. But he changed his mind. Is sort of a man of strong opinions, and he just changed his mind about it, meaning that the company became more open to the world, to its customers, and probably to developers as well. And NVIDIA CUDA, all of this ecosystem that is used to train and run large language models is sort of at the core right now. And I think that they're faring really, really well. I love to see more of NVIDIA in S&P 500 in the future.
This is interesting. Well, I'm kind of like a little bit, like a philosophical sidestep. Like it's interesting how I'm referring to, like Linus, the middle finger. So I personally haven't seen this, but like I'm not really following many things as well. But it's just like fascinated, like people change, as you mentioned yourself, like you need to be in motion, right? So you need to change, and it's still someone pulling something from your previous life, if you may, and just like, oh, look what you did. Like, come on, there was a different aspect back then, but like, yeah, anyways, doesn't matter. So there is, like more things I would like to talk to you about the leadership. Like I touched just base about that, but let's guess that maybe for the next time, because kind of like it's already like a lot of time passed through. So to wrap things up, I would like to ask, what tech innovations are you most excited about right now?
Right now, I think that I'm mostly excited about. You would be surprised, but hardware. Because I'm trying to sort of fill the gaps on hardware in my sort of perception of the technology world. And I'm super excited about the hardware just because we're living in sort of like a renaissance of hardware, which is abundant. our world is full of hardware. It's like everywhere you see a silicon chip.
Yeah.
It's a chip here. It's a washing machine. It's a dishwasher. It's like every LED has this, and hardware is like it's the Internet of Things that is invisibly coming, and you can get any kind of hardware nowadays. If you look at the times of my parents or grandparents, hardware was like in demand.
Yeah.
They used to stockpile old capacitors and stuff, and nowadays you get just like even after COVID. When COVID happened, the hardware was in such a high demand that the supply lines have been
Yeah.
sort of even stopped to an extent, and but now we're back on track, and hardware is everywhere. You can buy cheap hardware for literally no cost, and I'm pretty sure that hardware is underrated, really, really underrated, and you can build a lot of good stuff, not only with software but also with good and proper hardware. And I'm really super excited to see. Okay, will we have quantum? Will we have tune? How is it going to this 2 nanometer things
Hmm.
fare with AMD and Intel? Is it going to be more buggy processors? Because with scale, you add in more bugs, maybe. So hardware is really a fascination, and I'm now just. I hope I will have enough free time to tinker with all the stuff that comes up.
And are there any emergent technologies or methodologies that you believe will shape the future of how companies manage their infrastructure, or like maybe some, like things which like more interested about?
I think that we're going to be seeing more and more. Actually, right now we're seeing a lot of chip designs made by AI.
Okay.
So I think that this is something that is emerging, and there are a bunch of companies right now doing this because a single person or a team, an engineer, a set of bunch of engineers, it's difficult to comprehend the complexity of hardware nowadays. So it's going to be handled more and more by AI,
Hmm.
and hopefully for the good, and hopefully for the least hardware bugs because if you hit a hardware bug, you have to disable some
Yeah.
stuff in software. Then you just like you have a degraded capacity, like you lose your private cloud's capacity or public cloud, whatever is happening there behind the curtain. But I think that where the power of AI lies now to work to supplement the technology, the advancements that people are making, and just AI is there to support new ideas, not to create them, but to
Yeah.
support. So my bet would be that AI is going to design really, really nice hardware, as we will probably see in the next 10, maybe 20 years.
So do you think we're getting into this state where, for the like manufacturing of the chips or whatever, like where back in the day, like the engineers would be writing assembly, and then eventually, introduction of the higher level languages, and some would be like, well, I still can write a much efficient assembly than a machine could, and eventually machines are able to produce assembly which the humans cannot understand with like using the coroutines and stuff like that.
There is going to be as much AI in all the levels
Mm,
of programming, I guess. So it doesn't go that. I don't think that it's going to be that way. That we're going to see some compilers written fully in AI and being used only with, uh, you know,
yeah.
AI baked code. There's going to be a person in control.
Yeah.
As long as we don't have a personality AI person
Yeah.
which is held accountable for things like I'm not losing my job as an instructor because people can't commit to AI to learn things. Oh, it's just a robot. Why should promise that robot anything? But if they promise me that they're going to do a lab, I know that they are going to do the lab because I'm a real person.
Yeah.
So likewise, I would like to bet on a technology which is backed by people. It doesn't matter how much AI. I mean, as long as people are in control, AI can help and figure out stuff. But
Got it.
they are
Got it.
not. AI is still artificial.
Got it. So over our conversation, you mentioned something that, like all the cloud providers are, like are businesses, they are for making money. And you sort of mentioned, like that charity public cloud doesn't exist. So with that in mind, what is the next for Simonas? Any excited projects, goals on the horizon? What you're particularly, enthusiastic about?
Oh well, for myself, I think that there are a couple of things that I'm working on, but right now I'm super focused to uh, make a very nice pattern of the out of the way I do my instructing and
Mm-hmm.
teaching. So I'm now at the point where I can say I'm figuring out how to work with people that are willing to learn. So I see my all other hobbies a little bit diminishing, and I'm sort of like making myself super focused on that thing
Mm-hmm.
to improve myself because somehow other jobs that I had, they also all had this thing where maybe the I don't have enough hardware to tinker with, maybe I don't have enough people to work with, maybe I don't have enough software to sort of to manage, and now I think I'm getting focused. Is it because of my age or my experience or my former practices? I don't know, but my goal right now is to perfect the thing that I'm working, uh, the
Mm-hmm.
thing which I'm delivering, and then we'll see where it leads me because I'm right now only almost like 1.5 years in this role, and it's been a really an exciting journey. So every week when I'm doing a class, I'm learning myself. I do my classes in German, so I'm super
Oh,
happy to. Um, Deliver this in a every week in a better German language. But yeah, I think that some things will pop in my head, but they are just hobby projects. So
understood.
if I have my some time to play with some hardware like Risk architecture or anything, it's still a hobby.
Got it. Got it.
So a hobby is a very good thing to clear your head, and then oh, I'm with an empty head. Let's put some stuff into it.
I understand.
So
Okay. Thank you so much, Simonas, for joining me today. Really was nice having you.
thank you, Arturas. It was a unexpectedly a pleasant 100%, 120% nice conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right,
Bye.
bye.